Welcome back to the Roadmap to Retirement podcast. Matt, I'm glad you're here today. I got away from doing introductions for people because I always butcher it. So I want to let you tell our listeners who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
This is Roadmap to Retirement. Tune in for financial tips, investment strategies, and smart money moves to supercharge your retirement savings. Alex Neri, CFP, and guests are here to help you build your roadmap to retirement.
Great. Thank you for having me. My name is Matt Sommer. I work at Janus Henderson Investors. I'm coming up on 15 years, and I spend a great deal of my day thinking about financial planning and some of the many issues that individual investors are thinking about as they plan for their futures and being able to secure their futures, doing the things in life that they want to do.
Okay, great. That's an easy introduction. How did you land in the role that you're in now? Maybe we can start there.
Sure. I come to Janus Henderson. We're based in Denver, Colorado, by way of New York City. So I was in New York for 17 years with my former employer. And then in 2010, there was an opportunity at Janus Henderson that was just too good to pass up. So I discovered that, like most people who never leave the Northeast, you have that bias. There's actually a big old country west of the Hudson River. So that was exciting to see and exciting to experience. And next thing you know, you blink and it's 15 years later.
Yeah, it's crazy how time goes. And so I got the chance to meet you about a month ago. You're up in Rochester, New York, which is where I'm based out of. When you gave a couple presentations that kind of caught my eye or my ear, I should say. And I thought they'd be good topics to bring to our listeners. And the first one I want to start with is a scary one. And I've done cybersecurity on this podcast before, so in the same vein. But we're getting to see more and more of these kind of targeted AI type scams. And I know you have examples you can go into. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about how investors can protect themselves and protect their assets from all the bad players out there. I'll ask some more pointed questions, but anything you want to say on the topic to kick us off?
Sadly, this topic of financial exploitation is a growing problem in our country. And historically, when we thought about financial exploitation, it typically involved a victim who was suffering from some type of cognitive impairment. But the fraudsters have become so sophisticated and the technology has advanced so much that anyone at any age could easily fall victim. That's how sophisticated some of these scams have become. And so we've spent a lot of time researching this topic and talking about it to both advisors as well as investors to help them be on guard from some of the things that are going on in the marketplace.
Sure. I think the example you gave of the presentation was about a gentleman who received a phone call from, I think it was his son, or so he thought it was his son, saying basically, "Hey, Dad, I got an accident. I'm in trouble. I need money for," I can't remember if it was medical bills or whatever it was, but can you send money to this location? And they have a way of doing it now where it sounds just so legitimate that, to your point, it's not just like the elder people with cognitive decline that are being targeted anymore. It's your young, healthy, mentally with it person that could be a victim of such a scheme.
That's exactly right. And they actually have a name for it. It's called the grandparent scam because they typically target grandparents, but they target parents as well, as in the example that you shared. What's happening is fraudsters are going on to TikTok and Instagram, and they're using AI to capture the voice of young people, and then subsequently using that AI to place a call into that young person's parents or grandparents along the lines of, "I've been in a terrible car accident, people are hurt, I'm in jail, please help. Here's a telephone number for an attorney who's going to help me. Can you call him or her?" Of course, the grandparent is hearing their grandchild in distress. Of course, they want to help. They have no reason to believe it's not the person who they purport to be. They call the number, someone picks up the phone, they play the role of an attorney, they're very convincing. "Yes, I can get your grandchild out of jail. Bail is set at X, my fee is Y, and this is what you need to do to transfer the funds." So it's out there. It's a big problem. There are some red flags that we're sharing with the general public. But first and foremost, people need to know that these things are out there and they exist.
So I'm on a podcast. There's lots of audio of myself talking out there. Would you say someone like me is at higher risk for these kinds of scams? Are my parents more likely to get a phone call that sounds exactly like me because there's all this audio out there that the AI bots could use?
Yeah. So three things to keep in mind. And we don't want people to necessarily run out and cancel their social media accounts or not use social media because of these things. First and foremost, very few things in life require action right away. Oftentimes, if you just take a step back, you think, you digest, you speak to a trusted advisor or trusted relative about what's going on, you'll get a sense of clarity. Yeah, sometimes in life there's issues, there's accidents, there's emergencies that happens, unfortunately. But at the same time, very few things need to happen instantaneously. So the higher the pressure that an intended victim is feeling, the higher the probability that this may not necessarily be real. The second red flag is cryptocurrency. Not that there's anything wrong with cryptocurrency, but the way that most of these frauds are perpetrated is through some type of cryptocurrency. It allows them to cover their tracks. So it's one thing to wire money or send a check. It's another thing to make a transfer in some type of cryptocurrency. That's another red flag. And what more and more families are doing as a way to prevent this is that they're using a code word. So let's have a code word. We only know who it is. And if in fact we receive one of these telephone calls out of the blue, we know that we need to share our code word. And if we're not able to share our code word, then we're able to unveil one of these fraudsters sooner rather than later. So those are the three tips that we've been sharing with investors around the country.
I heard the code word thing before. Maybe that's something I should implement. So you pick a random word, and if you're in this distressful situation, your loved one is supposed to hear you say this word. Otherwise, they acknowledge it as a scam. They hang up on you and just hope that was right.
Exactly. So you can ask, oh, okay, gee, this is terrible. What's the code word? And if they're not able to respond pretty quick, then you'll know that maybe something just doesn't seem right. So it's a very simple, very low tech, very easy way to become alert of these things sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's still an emotionally hard thing to do. It sounds like your son or daughter on the phone and they don't say the code word. Well, they didn't say the code word, so click. I'm just going to assume that's not actually them. I think some people would have a hard time doing that.
Agreed. But that's the first line of defense. You could
Yeah.
also, are they asking, is someone asking for a transfer in crypto? That's another red flag.
Mhm.
Is this something that needs to be done in the next 10 minutes? Can I take a step back and think about it? That's another red flag. So if you use these tools in aggregate, we think that they are more likely to help weed out truth from fiction.
Sure, I like that. That's helpful. I think it's a lot of it's just spreading awareness, and I hope that doing this podcast makes people aware that this is something they need to think about, and hopefully have the conversations with the right relevant people.
Exactly.
For sure. So the other part of your presentation that again I saw a month ago or so that stood out to me was around this psychology of money and how we think about investing. And you referenced a book that I've also read, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Mhm.
I don't know if you have other book recommendations that follow up on this. I can think of like a dozen books that I've read that have a very similar theme.
Mhm.
But what's the jumping off point of that for an investment conversation? What is the foundation or the basis that people need to understand about their own human psychology and tendencies that affects the way that they interact with their money in the financial world?
The beauty of the book that you referenced, who was authored by Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize for his work in behavioral finance, is he makes it really simple. And he says that the way that we are wired to make decisions is we basically have two systems. System one is great. It's fast, it's automatic, it doesn't require a lot of effort. If you're driving home from work, you don't have to think about it. You do it every single day. System two is requires calculation, requires deliberation. I know for me, one of my challenges in life is parallel parking. So if I'm going to parallel park, I need to use system two because I need to think, I need to turn the radio off, I need to concentrate. The problem is when we start making financial decisions using system one instead of system two. And you would think, gee, can't you just turn it off? And you can't because it's involuntary. It's like breathing or blinking. And so the key point and the key takeaway at a very high level is that oftentimes when we're making difficult and hard financial decisions, there's a sense of stress that only exasperates the system to take over. And it's really important for investors to take a step back, take a deep breath, don't react, think, talk to people, the decision will be there tomorrow. It'll be there the day after tomorrow. When we make rapid fire decisions like driving home from work because we know it automatically, we don't necessarily have to deliberate in our own minds, that tends to be when mistakes are made. And quite frankly, for most of us, not everyone, but for most of us, the key to financial success and the retirement we all envision is staying out of avoiding those big mistakes. Small, consistent wins over time, but avoiding the big mistakes as well.
Yeah, my mind, when you think about system one and system two, I think of where we are in the news cycle with a new administration. I get phone calls all the time from clients. They're saying either I really don't like this or I really love it. So we have both sides of the spectrum, right? So we get some people say, I hate this guy. I don't trust him. I want to pull all my money and get it into cash under my mattress. And we have other people that are like, this guy's the Lord and Savior. I want to put all of my money back into the market. And we got to balance that. So that's like the system one saying that I'm seeing something on the news and I'm reacting right away to a detailed financial plan. We're using Sysinvest. This is why we want to invest. This is our risk tolerance, our time horizon. We put a lot of work into that system two process. And then we got to remind people of that system two process when system one kicks in and they feel emotionally tied to their investments again.
It's really interesting. We surveyed 1,000 people last summer, and these are investors across the country. And we asked them, what is your biggest financial concern? Is it higher interest rates? Is it the risk of inflation? Is it losing money in the stock market? Is it job insecurity? What is it inflation? What is it? And interestingly, the number one cited concern is I'm really concerned about the upcoming presidential election. Based on that, we did an analysis, and what we found is if you go back 80 years, whether it's a Republican president, a Democrat president, divided government, unified government, election year, non-election year, over the long run, it really doesn't matter. So I know people may have strong feelings one way or the other, but what happens in the Beltway, we have, to the best of our ability, ignore the noise and just stay focused on the long term.
Yeah, I have so many examples of this. I actually just talked to a guy earlier today on the phone who is a client. He's on one side of the aisle. He's very happy about Trump. He's one of those guys, and that's fine. But 4 years ago, we had a conversation where all of a sudden he was nervous about his investments, and we took some risk off the table. Against my advice, he said, I don't trust Joe Biden. I don't like the direction the country's heading. I'm nervous, so I want to go from being an aggressive investor to a moderate investor. And I give my advice. I say, at the end of the day, this is your money. Whatever you'd like to do, we're here to support you. But here's what the research suggests. This is what your plan said we should do. Anyway, he goes ahead and we do make an adjustment to become a little bit more conservative, which is fine. It didn't kill him. But now here we are 4 years later, and he's, oh yeah, I remember we made that change 4 years ago. How would it have gone if we didn't? And that's okay, Mr. Client. The market's gone up under Joe Biden as well. So you lost money by doing that. And it's not, there's other benefits to it too. It's not just let's always make the most money. There's benefits to taking the risk off the table. It could have gone a different direction. And maybe he slept better at night for 4 years knowing that he wasn't taking that risk. But just a quick example to highlight how the thing that you perceive to be true, all of a sudden 4 years go by and you're like, maybe it wasn't as scary as I thought.
Yeah. And the other aspect to Kahneman's book, which is really interesting, is many of us, not everyone, but many of us tend to be overconfident in our ability to predict the future. Oh, the person who I like is coming into office, so I'm going to go all in on the equity market. Or the person who I don't like is coming into office, so I'm going to sell my stocks and go to bonds and cash because we think we can predict the future. But the reality is that it's a lot harder than we think it is.
Yeah, and just another conversation to give an example on the other side. On Monday, I had a client come in the office who was the opposite, right? She was very concerned about Trump, scared of whatever. And I tried to take the stress level down a little bit and say, okay, we've been through this before, right? I know this guy is scary and you feel the way you do and you don't like him for a lot of reasons. That's fine. But he actually was president for 4 years before. So we do have a very small sample size, but we have some evidence that maybe it will be investing as usual, hopefully. So having that conversation, then where does it go directly is this time's different. And I'm sure you've heard that a million times in your career, but this time's different. I know that before it was this and this, but I have a feeling or whatever it is, it's hard to get away from that gut reaction.
Very hard. And I think what you're talking about illustrates something that we talk about all the time, which is the value of professional advice. Many times we're out there working with individual investors, talking to individual investors, and we ask them about professional advice and their financial advisors. And so often the conversation goes to what was my return last year? And yes, financial advisors give investment advice and they help you put together a portfolio, and returns are important. But what we find more often than not is what the best advisors tend to do is offer peace of mind. They help people stay the course. I even heard it referred to as a money doctor, if you will. And so it's getting into this idea of the psychology behind investing and one of the true values that financial advisors provide.
Yeah, sometimes it's just that gatekeeper, like having to go, you
Mhm.
have an idea of how you want to change your investments, and if it's a click away, you'll do it. But if you have to pick up the phone or shoot your advisor an email and say out loud the justification for why you think you need to change something, all of a sudden, just saying it out loud makes it feel different, right?
Sure.
You see this feeling of, okay, I guess it is a little crazy. Maybe I need to settle down and stick to the plan. And I can throw examples at you all day, but another one that comes to mind is back during COVID, having phone calls with clients that at the bottom of the market were freaking out and wanted to go to cash. And I can think of several examples where I was able to talk them into staying invested. And what happens in hindsight's 2020, but the market comes back. And had they not listened to me, they're literally losing hundreds of thousands of dollars because they got emotional. So I'd like to think that I provide that value, and none of them ever called and thanked me, but maybe they will soon.
I bet they're thankful.
We covered two big topics already. We talked about how to protect yourself from these AI scams. We talked about kind of the psychology behind investing. Is there a third topic that you're hoping to cover today?
For the third topic, I think we need to keep our eye, speaking of politics and an incoming administration. The third topic that we have our eye on is what's going to happen with the 2017 tax cuts. As many of your listeners know, they are set to expire on December 31st of 2025. It appears by all indications that they will be extended, but when and what that's going to look like is largely up in the air. So we need to keep an eye on potential for new tax legislation. The other interesting thing that happened recently is Social Security changed a couple of their rules. So things like the offset or things like the windfall provision no longer apply effective 2024 for people who are covered by both a private and public employers. You're probably familiar with that terminology. So we live in an ever-changing world beyond the stock market and what's happening on Wall Street. And so it's just very important for people to keep their eye on things, not to overreact, but stay informed and adjust and pivot when and if needed.
Yeah. The tax cuts and job, it's something that we heard a lot of going into the election. I think most people are defaulting to the stance of it'll probably stay the same. Are there any tweaks that you might speculate would be made with that?
We're of that camp that in all likelihood, and look, as I said a little bit earlier, we're not as good as predicting the future as we like to think we are. In all likelihood, we're of the opinion that things are going to stay the same. We would like to see some relief relative to the ability to deduct state income taxes. So this is what's known as SALT, state and local tax deduction, particularly for states such as yourself in New York, whereby it would be more beneficial to go back to itemizing your deductions versus the standard deduction. So we have an eye on that as a potential perhaps change. But again, if we had to give our best prediction as of today, we think that it'll probably be status quo heading into 2026.
Sounds good. Stability sounds like a good thing to me, but we'll see how it all shakes out. Matt, thank you for doing this. We appreciate your time. If there's anything we can do to help you out, feel free to reach out. And to all our listeners, how can they find you?
So the best way to learn more about us is janushenderson.com. And you can just click individual investors and you can just learn a lot more about financial exploitation and investor psychology and some of the different things we're thinking about.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Alexander Neri. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Alexander Neri or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Alexander Neri and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.